We are currently standing at the precipice of a shift so fundamental that it rivals the introduction of electricity or the internet, yet most people are still viewing it through the lens of a simple software update. When I look at the trajectory of computing power over the last 30 years, specifically the relentless march of accelerated computing, I see a pattern that is undeniable and accelerating. For decades, the value of a human being in the economic machine was largely defined by their ability to process information, to calculate, to code, to write, and to reason through logical problems. We built an entire education system and a global economy based on the scarcity of intelligence. If you could solve a complex math problem, you were valuable. If you could debug a piece of software, if you could draft a legal contract, you were paid a premium. But what happens to the value of those tasks when the marginal cost of intelligence drops to effectively zero? This is not a hypothetical question for the distant future. It is the reality we are engineering right now. I have spent my life watching the curves of Moore's law, and now the even faster curves of AI scaling. We are moving from an era where computing was about retrieval, fetching a file that someone else wrote, to an era of generation where the computer creates the solution on the fly. This changes the fundamental physics of work. If I can rent a digital intelligence for a few dollars a month that is smarter, faster, and more consistent than the average university graduate at technical tasks, then the market value of purely technical skills begins to collapse. This sounds alarming to many, and perhaps it should be if your entire career strategy is built on being a repository of facts or a processor of syntax. However, this is not the end of human value. It is an inversion of it. Think about the transition from agriculture to industry. When the tractor arrived, the physical strength of the farmer became less valuable. The farmer who could plow the hardest was no longer the winner. The winner was the one who could manage the system of the farm. We are seeing the same thing happen now with cognitive labor. The muscle of the brain calculation, syntax, memory is being mechanized. This means that the assets that will retain and gain value in the next decade are not the ones we have spent the last 50 years optimizing for. The ability to write code is becoming less valuable than the ability to understand what problem needs to be solved. The ability to write a generic email is becoming worthless, while the ability to forge a genuine bond of trust with another human being is becoming priceless. I often think about this when I talk to young engineers or students. They ask me what they should study, and they expect me to say a specific programming language or a specific branch of mathematics. But the answer is more complex. The scarcity is shifting. When intelligence is abundant, wisdom becomes scarce. When perfection is cheap, taste becomes expensive. We are entering a period where the barrier to entry for creating anything, software, media, products, is vanishing. This creates a noise so deafening that only the clearest signals will get through. The assets that will survive this transition are the ones that AI cannot simulate because they are rooted in the physics of the real world, the complexity of biological emotion, and the deep accumulated intuition of domain expertise. This is not a message of doom, it is a message of adaptation. The train has already left the station. You cannot stop the democratization of intelligence, but you can choose to position yourself where the value is flowing, rather than standing where the value is evaporating. Over the next few minutes, I want to walk you through the 4 specific human assets that I believe will not only survive this transition, but will become the most valuable commodities on the planet. These are the things that cannot be downloaded, cannot be prompted, and cannot be generated in a data center. These are the anchors that will hold you steady while everything else changes. To understand why we are standing on such shifting ground right now, you have to look beyond the daily news cycle of new model releases or stock prices and look at the fundamental architecture of the global economy. Because what is happening is not just a technological upgrade, but a complete rewriting of the operating system of work itself. For the last century, the entire industrial and corporate world was organized around a pyramid structure where the base was made up of millions of people doing repetitive cognitive tasks: filing, sorting, basic calculating, drafting standard responses, and processing data. And as you moved up the pyramid, the task became more abstract and strategic. But the base was always necessary because without those human hours, the machinery of business would grind to a halt. The education system was designed to feed this base, churning out graduates who were reliable components in a larger system, capable of following instructions and executing standard operating procedures with reasonable accuracy. But today, we are witnessing the deployment of a technology that doesn't just automate the blue-collar physical labor of the factory floor, which we saw in the 20th century, but automates the white-collar cognitive labor of the office tower. And it is doing so at a pace that is completely unprecedented in human history. When I look at the scaling laws of these large language models and the computational power we are deploying to train them, it becomes obvious that we are rapidly approaching a point where the cost of average cognitive work, the kind of work that occupies 80% of the time for 80% of the workforce, this is the big picture context that so many people are missing. They are still preparing for a world where their value comes from their ability to execute tasks, whereas the new reality is a world where value comes from the ability to command systems. We are moving from an economy of how to an economy of what and why. In the old world, the barrier to entry was the technical how to write the code, how to structure the spreadsheet, how to format the legal brief. Today, the how is being solved by machines that can iterate thousands of times per second. This collapses the premium on technical execution. You see this happening already in software engineering, where the conversation is shifted from who is the best C++ coder to who is the best systems architect, because the coding itself is becoming a commodity. This shift is creating a massive divergence in outcomes. For those who understand how to leverage these tools, productivity is not increasing by 10% or 20%. It is increasing by 10x or 100x, creating a class of super-empowered individuals who can do the work of entire departments. But for those who are still operating under the old rules, trying to compete on speed or memorization, the ground is crumbling beneath them. I see this creating a paradox in the job market where we have a shortage of people who can think critically and manage complexity, simultaneously with a surplus of people who are credentialed but functionally obsolete because their primary skill was doing the thing the AI now does better. The environment you are operating in now is one where good enough is free. If you can write a good enough article, draw a good enough illustration, or write a good enough script, you are now competing with a machine that can do it instantly for pennies. This means the middle is dying, the safe, average path. The path that said go to school, get good grades, get a stable job doing a clearly defined task is becoming the most dangerous path of all because that is exactly the territory the algorithms are conquering first. This creates an urgency that is not about panic, but about pivot. The world isn't waiting for you to catch up. The rate of technological compounding is exponential, while human adaptability is linear, which means the gap between those who embrace this new leverage and those who ignore it is widening every single day. We are transitioning from the information age, where value is created by accessing and hoarding information, to the intelligence age, where value is created by synthesizing and applying information to solve novel problems. In the information age, the person with the encyclopedia was the expert. In the intelligence age, everyone has the encyclopedia, and the expert is the one who knows which page matters. This shift changes the definition of experience. In the past, 20 years of experience meant you had seen every variation of a problem and memorized the solution. Today, when the problems are changing faster than the solutions can be memorized, experience means something else entirely. It means the accumulation of judgment, the intuitive understanding of human dynamics, and the ability to navigate uncertainty. The old path was like climbing a ladder. You could see the rungs, you knew where you were going, and you just had to keep stepping. The new reality is like navigating a jungle. There are no clear paths. The terrain is constantly shifting, and you need a completely different set of tools. A compass instead of a map. I observe companies realizing this in real time. They are stopping the hiring of headcount for execution roles and pouring resources into infrastructure and high-level talent that can orchestrate AI. This is a capital for labor substitution on a scale we haven't seen since the Industrial Revolution. And just like the Industrial Revolution, it will eventually create more wealth and new kinds of jobs. But the transition period, the period we are living through right now, is going to be turbulent for anyone who refuses to acknowledge the change. The comfortable illusion that AI is just a tool and humans will always be in the loop is dangerous because while humans will be in the loop, The question you have to ask yourself is not, will AI replace me? But am I building the kind of skills that allow me to stand on top of AI, or am I building the kind of skills that lie beneath it? The context of this decade is a race between your ability to reinvent yourself and the machine's ability to learn your job. Understanding this doesn't mean you should despair. It means you should be strategic. It means you must stop investing your time in learning things that are about to be demonetized. It means realizing that the hard skills of yesterday are the soft skills of today, and the soft skills of yesterday, empathy, leadership, communication, strategic foresight, are becoming the new hard skills that underpin all value. The market is efficient, it will pay for what is scarce. As intelligence becomes abundant, the ability to direct that intelligence toward meaningful human outcomes becomes the ultimate scarcity. This is the environment we are in, a world where the ceiling of possibility is being raised to the stratosphere, but the floor of security is being removed. To navigate this, you cannot rely on the maps drawn by previous generations, because those maps depict a world that no longer exists. You have to look at the terrain as it is now, a landscape dominated by accelerated computing, generative intelligence, and rapid disruption. This is the reality. It is neutral. It doesn't care if you succeed or fail. It simply rewards alignment with the new physics of work and punishes misalignment. So, as we move into the core framework, keep this context in mind. We are not just talking about career tips, we are talking about survival and thriving in a new evolutionary epoch of the economy. The core framework for surviving and thriving in this new era requires a fundamental shift in how we identify value, moving away from the ability to process information and toward the ability to orchestrate outcomes. And this begins with the first and perhaps most subtle asset, unwavering taste and curatorial judgment. In a world where generative AI can produce 1,000 images, 10,000 lines of code, or 100 marketing emails in the blink of an eye, the bottleneck shifts from creation to selection, meaning the world does not need more creators in the traditional sense, but rather it needs high-level editors and curators who possess a deep, intuitive sense of what is good, true, or effective. If you look at the trajectory of AI, it is trained on the average of all human output, which means its default setting is to produce average, plausible, mediocre work. The bell curve of quality. So the human asset that commands a premium is the ability to look at 10 AI-generated solutions and instantly know which one creates emotional resonance, which one fits the strategic nuance, and which one contains a subtle flaw that would cause a catastrophic failure down the line. This requires a depth of domain expertise that cannot be shortcut. You cannot curate code if you don't understand the logic of systems, and you cannot curate design if you haven't studied the history of aesthetics, which brings up a critical mathematical reality regarding your time investment. If you spend 10,000 hours learning to execute a task that an AI can now do in 3 seconds, you have wasted your life. But if you spend that same 10,000 hours studying the principles behind the task, the why, the second asset, which is becoming the currency of the future economy, is high bandwidth trust and relationship capital. Because as digital content becomes infinite and essentially free, its trustworthiness drops to zero, creating a trust vacuum where people will become incredibly skeptical of anything they see on a screen, driving the premium for human-to-human verification through the roof. We are entering an era of deep fakes and dead internet theory, where you might not know if the email, video, or voice note you received is real, and in that environment, the ability to look someone in the eye, shake their hand, and say, "I will make this happen," becomes the most valuable technology on earth. Business, at its highest level, has never been about contracts. It has been about confidence between two biological entities who believe the other has skin in the game, and AI cannot have skin in the game. It cannot lose sleep over a client's problem, and it cannot put its reputation on the line. Consider the math of this asset over a 20-year career. If you focus on technical skills, your value depreciates every time a new version of the software is released, effectively resetting your equity in that skill to zero every few years, forcing you to run on a treadmill just to stay in the same place. However, if you focus on relationship capital, building a reputation for integrity, empathy, and reliability, that asset compounds like interest in a bank account, where the trust you earned 10 years ago makes the deal you are doing today easier, faster, and more profitable, it is an asset with zero depreciation and infinite upside. The third asset is what I call adaptive agency, or the ability to define the problem, because AI is fundamentally a reactive engine. It answers questions, it follows prompts, it executes commands, but it does not wake up in the morning with a vision for the future, nor does it walk into a chaotic business situation and figure out what the actual problem is. Most people are trained to be solvers. They wait for a boss to give them a clearly defined task. But in the AI era, the solver is the software, and the human must become the definer. This is the difference between the junior engineer who asks, "How do I write this function?" and the senior architect who asks, "Should we even be building this feature, or is there a completely different way to solve the customer's pain?" To develop this asset, you must become comfortable with ambiguity, venturing into the fog where the data is incomplete and the path is unclear, and using your intuition to forge a direction. The opportunity cost here is staggering. I see organizations spending millions of dollars optimizing the wrong things because they have incredible AI tools solving problems that don't matter, simply because they lack humans with the agency to step back and redirect the ship. If you can be the person who brings clarity to chaos, who can synthesize disparate pieces of information into a coherent strategy, you will never be replaced, because AI needs a prompt, and you are the prompter. The fourth and final asset is physical world accountability, or the bridge between the digital and the real, because while AI lives in the cloud, we live in reality, and the friction of the physical world, logistics, regulatory hurdles, human emotions, hardware integration is something that software cannot hallucinate its way through. We are seeing a massive bifurcation where bits, software, media, text are becoming cheap, while atoms, energy, housing, healthcare, manufacturing are becoming expensive. And the people who can operate at the intersection of these two worlds are going to be the new titans of industry. AI can design a bridge, but it cannot negotiate with the city council. It cannot manage the construction crew's morale during a rainstorm, and it cannot take legal responsibility if the concrete fails. This concept of accountability is key. When things go wrong, we humans have a primal need to look at another human and hold them responsible, a psychological mechanism that will not disappear. If you position yourself as the person who owns the outcome, the one who signs the paper, who stands in front of the room, who takes the risk, you insulate yourself from automation because you are selling something AI cannot provide: liability absorption. Let's do the math on the long-term impact of ignoring these four assets. Imagine two professionals starting today, where person A focuses on becoming the fastest coder in Python, and person B focuses on becoming a systems architect who understands client needs, builds a network of trust, and learns to direct AI tools. In 5 years, person A is competing with an AI that codes 1,000x faster than them for 1/1000th of the cost, and their wages will compress until they are forced out of the market. Person B, however, has used that same AI to increase their leverage, doing the work of 10 people, and because their value is tied to the relationships and the judgment rather than the typing, their income scales with their productivity. Over a 30-year horizon, the difference in net worth between these two paths isn't just double or triple, it is exponential. The difference between a laborer and a capital allocator. You have to understand that we are moving from a world of labor economy to a leverage economy. In a labor economy, you are paid for your time and your effort. In a leverage economy, you are paid for the magnitude of the decisions you make and the quality of the systems you control. These four assets, taste, trust, agency, and accountability, are the levers. If you possess them, AI becomes your exoskeleton, making you stronger, faster, and more capable than any human in history. If you lack them, AI becomes your replacement. It is crucial to realize that these skills are not soft skills. In the derogatory sense, they are the hardest skills of all because they are the most difficult to replicate, the most difficult to fake, and the most difficult to scale. You can scale code by copying a file. You cannot scale trust without investing years of consistent behavior. You can scale data processing by adding more GPUs. You cannot scale taste without a lifetime of exposure to quality. This scarcity is what protects your economic future. When I look at the landscape of the next decade, I don't see a jobless future, but I see a future where the job descriptions change so radically that 90% of current job titles will effectively become meaningless. We will stop hiring writers and start hiring narrative strategists. We will stop hiring coders and start hiring product visionaries. The distinction is subtle but profound. It is the difference between the person who lays the bricks and the person who designs the cathedral. For the last 100 years, the economy paid you to lay bricks. For the next 100 years, the economy will pay you to design cathedrals, and the AI will lay the bricks for you. This transition will be painful for those who insist on holding on to the trowel, but it will be liberating for those who are willing to pick up the blueprints. I want you to think about your current daily activities and audit them ruthlessly. What percentage of your day is spent on tasks that require true judgment, real human connection, navigating ambiguity, or taking physical responsibility? If the answer is less than 50%, you are in the danger zone. You are holding a depreciating asset. You need to aggressively reallocate your portfolio of skills. Think of your career like an investment portfolio. You wouldn't hold 100% of your money in a stock that you know is going to zero, so why would you hold 100% of your time in a skill set that is trending towards zero value? The smart money is moving into the assets that AI cannot touch. It is moving into the messy, complex, emotional, high-stakes world of human leadership and creative direction. That is where the alpha is. That is where the security is. And ultimately, that is where the meaning is. Because at the end of the day, machines are tools for answers, but humans are the creators of meaning. Now, we need to strip away the optimism for a moment and look at the brutal reality of this transition, because there is a dangerous misconception floating around that simply learning how to use AI tools is the safety net that will save you. I see this narrative everywhere. Online courses, corporate seminars, social media influencers telling you that if you just learn to write a good prompt, if you just learn the latest interface, you will be ahead of the curve. Let me be incredibly clear, that is a lie, and believing it is a career-ending mistake. Learning the tool is not a competitive advantage, it is merely the new baseline for literacy, equivalent to learning how to type in the 1990s. If your entire strategy relies on being the guy who knows how to use the AI, you are building your house on sand because the AI companies are spending billions of dollars specifically to remove the need for that skill. They are designing the tools to be intuitive, invisible, and automatic, so the prompt engineer is a temporary role that will exist for maybe another 18 months before it evaporates. The deeper, more uncomfortable truth is that AI is raising the floor of mediocrity so high that it is effectively drowning anyone who stands on it. In the past, being average was okay. You could have an average career, do average work, and earn an average salary because average competence was still scarce enough to command a wage. Today, this means the economic value of being average has crashed to zero. This creates a terrifying binary outcome. You are either exceptional or you are invisible. There is no middle ground anymore. The safe corporate job where you could hide in the bureaucracy, do a few hours of real work, and cruise to retirement, that is gone. Those roles are the low-hanging fruit for automation because they are based on friction and inefficiency, and AI is a friction-removing engine. I want you to really internalize the junior trap that is forming right now. Traditionally, you learned a trade by being an apprentice. You did the grunt work, the boring coding, the basic research, the rough drafts, and through that repetition, you built the intuition to become a master. But AI now does the grunt work. So, companies are stopping the hiring of juniors because why pay a human to do what the software does instantly? This breaks the ladder. If you cannot get on the bottom rung, this means the burden of learning has shifted entirely onto your shoulders. You can no longer rely on an employer to train you. You have to train yourself on your own time with a level of discipline that 99% of people simply do not possess. This is the filter. The barrier to entry isn't intelligence anymore, it's the sheer will to suffer through the learning process when a machine offers you an easy shortcut. I see people falling into the trap of intellectual obesity. They let the AI do the thinking for them. They let the AI write the email, structure the argument, solve the bug, and their own cognitive muscles atrophy. They feel productive, but they are actually becoming fragile. If you take away the tool, they are helpless. The market will eventually sniff this out. Real value comes from the struggle of solving hard problems, and if you outsource the struggle, you outsource the growth. We also have to address the reality of speed. The pace of change is now faster than the human capacity to adapt emotionally. You might spend 2 years mastering a workflow, only for a new model to release on a Tuesday morning that renders that entire workflow obsolete. This happens not once, but repeatedly. This induces a state of future fatigue or psychological burnout. The winners in the next decade will not necessarily be the smartest people, they will be the most psychologically resilient people. The ones who can watch their hard-earned skills become worthless overnight, shrug their shoulders, and start learning the next thing the next morning without bitterness. Most people cannot do this. They will cling to the old ways. They will complain that it's not fair. They will try to unionize against the math, but the math doesn't care. The market is a ruthlessly efficient mechanism for allocating resources, and it is currently reallocating resources away from human cognitive labor. You have to accept that your labor, by itself, is no longer an asset. The only thing that turns it into an asset is the leverage you apply to it. This means you have to stop thinking of yourself as a worker and start thinking of yourself as a founder, even if you work for someone else. A worker waits for instructions. A founder looks for opportunities to create value. In an AI world, the worker mindset is a death sentence. You must also confront the illusion of competence. Because AI allows you to produce high-quality output without high-quality understanding, we are going to see a flood of people who look like experts but have no depth. They can generate the code, but they can't debug the architecture. They can generate the marketing plan, but they don't understand consumer psychology. This will create a massive crisis of trust. And when the inevitable crash happens, when the AI-generated code breaks the bank system, or the AI-generated strategy bankrupts the company, the pendulum will swing violently back toward proven, deep human expertise. But until that correction happens, you are going to be competing in a noisy, chaotic marketplace where charlatans with good prompting skills can temporarily outshine you. You will watch people with half your experience get attention because they are using shortcuts. You have to have the discipline to play the long game, knowing that the shortcut is a dead end. The reality is that the 4 assets I mentioned in the previous section, taste, trust, agency, accountability, are hard. They are painful to acquire. They require risk. They require you to put your name on things that might fail. They require you to have difficult conversations with real people instead of hiding behind a screen. Most people will look at that list and say, "That sounds too hard. I'll just learn Python." And that is exactly why the opportunity exists. The difficulty is the moat. If it were easy, the AI would already do it. So, when you feel the resistance, when you feel the fear of taking responsibility or the frustration of deep learning, you must recognize that feeling as the signal of value. That discomfort is the feeling of you separating yourself from the algorithm. If you are comfortable, the safety of the herd is an illusion because the herd is heading toward the cliff of obsolescence. You have to be willing to stand alone, to look at the data, and to say, "I will not compete on the machine's terms. I will compete on human terms." This reality check isn't meant to scare you into paralysis. It is meant to scare you into action. It is meant to wake you up from the daydream that everything will work out just fine if you keep doing what you've always done. It won't. The rules have changed, the board has been flipped, and the game is effectively brand new. The only question left is whether you are playing to win or just playing to not lose. Because in this new reality, playing to not lose is the surest way to lose everything. Heart T. 800 words. As we reach the end of this exploration, I want to leave you with a perspective shift that I believe is the most critical component of all, because ultimately, the future is not determined by the hardware we build, but by the mindset we adopt to wield it. When I look 10 years down the road, I don't see a world where humans are obsolete. I see a world where humans are finally forced to be human. For the last 2 centuries, The economic machine has asked us to act like robots, to be consistent, to be repetitive, to be error-free, to memorize data, and to process logic. And because we were the best available technology for those tasks, we complied, suppressing our creativity and our chaos to fit into the industrial mold. Now we have built actual robots, digital and physical, that can do those robotic tasks infinitely better than we ever could. And this is causing an identity crisis because it feels like we are losing our purpose. But the truth is, we are not losing our purpose. We are shedding a constraint. We are being liberated from the necessity of being machines. This transition is uncomfortable because freedom is always more terrifying than captivity. In captivity, the rules are clear, but in freedom, you have to decide where to go. This brings us to the ultimate choice you face today, a choice that goes far beyond career advice or financial planning. You can choose the path of resistance, trying to compete with the algorithm on speed and efficiency, clinging to the old definitions of work, and inevitably finding yourself exhausted and marginalized. Or you can choose the path of elevation, accepting that your role is no longer to be the engine, but to be the steering wheel. The four assets we discussed, taste, trust, agency, and accountability, are not just skills, they are the distinct markers of consciousness. They are the proof of life. The machine can generate a million answers, but it cannot care about a single one of them. You can. The machine can simulate empathy, but it cannot feel the weight of a promise. You can. The machine can predict the future based on the past, but it cannot imagine a future that violates the data. You can. This is your competitive advantage, the ability to care, to dream, and to take a stand. I often tell people that we are entering the golden age of intent. In the past, your intent was limited by your ability to execute. You might have had a great idea for a movie, a software platform, or a business, but you lacked the technical skills or the capital to build it, so the idea died. In the next decade, the friction of execution is collapsing to zero. If you can imagine it, and if you can articulate it clearly, the AI can build it. This means the only limit on your output is the clarity of your intent and the quality of your taste. This is a profound democratization of power, but it demands a profound elevation of responsibility. You can no longer blame the how for holding you back. You are left alone with the why. This creates a landscape where the winners will be the philosophers, the dreamers, and the leaders who can harness this infinite horsepower and direct it toward meaningful ends. So, as you look at your screen, as you look at the news, do not feel small. Do not feel replaced. Realize that you are the architect of this new era. The AI is waiting for you. It is a dormant engine sitting in the driveway, immense and powerful, but completely useless until you get in the driver's seat and turn the key. The skills that got you here will not get you there, but the humanity that defines you is the only thing that matters. Stop trying to be a better computer. Start being a bolder human. The future belongs to the curious, the courageous, and the accountable. It belongs to the people who are willing to look at the infinite noise of the machine and find the signal of the truth. That is the work of the next decade. That is the work of a lifetime. The tools are ready. The question is, are you?